Our budget app will teach us how to code and display visualizations of our data. We will learn how to create a bar chart through combining different widgets, and we will also learn how to build our own custom painter to create a radial progress bar. The first screen has a bar chart of our weekly expenses and divides our spending up into categories. The color of the bar for each category changes based on how much money we have remaining. In our category screen, we can view our remaining amount of money and expense breakdown. Download the project attached to this lecture, and let's get started. When you open up the downloaded Flutter project, you will see that we already have 4 files. The first file is main.dart, where we have all of the boilerplate code. The second file is in the data folder, called data.dart, and that contains all the data that we're going to generate for this project. The third file is called category model, and this contains our category class. And the fourth file is called expense model, which is our expense class. Let's run through our data.dart file so we know what kind of data we're generating and how it's going to be used throughout our app. The first variable we create is called rand, and we make it equal to an instance of random, so it becomes a random number generator. Next, we declare a list of doubles called weekly spending, and this is going to populate the data inside our weekly spending bar graph. By doing rand.nextDouble, we're generating a random value between 0 and 1 exclusive, and multiplying it by 100. So if we get the value 0.5 from our rand.nextDouble times 100, then we get a value of 50. And then we call it 7 times because we have 7 days in the week. So the first value here corresponds to Sunday, the next one corresponds to Monday, and the next one corresponds to Tuesday, and so on. Beneath this, we have generate expenses. And inside here, we're creating a list of expenses. And the expense class we can see has a final string name and a final double cost. Our expenses list consists of 6 different expenses, each with a different name and different cost. Here we multiply the random.nextDouble by 90, so then our cost will always be less than $90. And then finally we declare a list of categories, and if we look at our category model, we see that each category consists of a name, a max amount, and a list of expenses. Max amount represents the total amount of money that the user allocates towards a category's budget. And back inside data.dart, we see that we also generate expenses, so we get a random list of expenses every single time we hot restart the app, which gives us different values for all of our categories. Let's start cleaning up the main.dart file of our application. We can change the title of our app to Flutter Budget UI. And then to change the color of our app from blue to green, we can just remove colors.blue and change it to colors.green. And also change primary swatch to primary color. And hit save. Next, let's remove the debug banner in the top right by going right underneath our title and adding debug show checked mode banner and setting that to false. After that, we can remove all the boilerplate code for the My Home page down here. And instead of doing My Home page, we're going to create our own screen called Home Screen. So let's write Home Screen. And we want to create this screen inside our lib directory. So let's make a folder called Screens. And inside Screens, we're going to make home_screen.dart. Inside our home screen, we need to create a stateful widget. And I can do this by typing in stf, because I'm using the VS Code extension called Awesome Flutter Snippets. So if you don't have that already, make sure you install that. And we're going to name this home screen. And don't forget to import material.dart. Let's change the container to a scaffold. Hit save. And going back to main.dart, and if we hover over home screen, we can import home screen by just clicking quick fix and selecting package. The other way we can do this is by clicking on home screen, and then on Mac, command period, and then it pops open the selector where we can just choose the same import. And hit save. And now we see that our screen changed to a blank screen. Taking a look at our UI, we can see that we have a sliver app bar up here, and below this is a sliver list. So let's go into our home screen.dart. And we'll move this over so we can see it. let's add a body to our scaffold. And we need to create a custom scroll view. Inside this custom scroll view, we're going to have slivers, and that's going to be a list of widgets. To create our sliver app bar, we just have to type sliver app bar, and then we can add a flexible space, flexible space bar, title, text, simple budget. Hit save, and now we see that we have our app bar on top. To add the settings button, we can create a leading icon button, icon, icons.settings, and then we'll make the icon size equal to 30.0 and add the onPress function. And now our settings button appeared. To add the add button, we're going to create actions, and inside this list of widgets, we're going to write icon button, icon, icons.add, and we'll set the icon size to 30.0, and then the onPressed will do nothing here too. And now we see that we have our icon buttons on the side, and when we scroll up, the app bar rises into the screen. If we look at the app bar here, we see that simple budget looks a lot bigger, and that it looks like we have some kind of height setting on this app bar. So what we can do is add an expanded height property to the sliver app bar and set that equal to 100.0. And now the app bar became a lot larger. If we scroll up, we see the simple budget text shrinks and becomes in line with the icon buttons. And if we keep scrolling, it disappears. The two other properties we want to add to our app bar are force elevated, and we'll set that to true, and that's going to show a shadow underneath our app bar. And the second one is floating, and set that equal to true. And floating is going to allow us to see the app bar when we scroll up, even if we're not at the very top of the screen. And we'll see how that works in a second once we create our sliver list. So beneath our sliver app bar, let's create sliver list. And our sliver list is going to have a delegate, sliver child builder delegate. It's going to have a build context, and an index. So it's similar to a list view builder. And make sure you guys put your commas in the right places. For now, we'll just return a container with height 100. And then we'll set the color equal to colors.red. And we'll add margin edge insets.all 10.0. And in order for our sliver child builder delegate to know how many containers to render, we need to designate a child count. And we'll set that equal to 10 for now, and hit save. And if we look at our app, we see that we have 10 red containers rendered on our screen, and when we scroll up, the app bar fades away. And when we scroll down a bit, the app bar comes back instantly, even though we're not at the top of the screen. And when we keep scrolling, we get to the top. There's also another property we can add to our sliver app bar called pinned. We'll set that to true. And let's comment out floating. When we hit save and scroll through the app, we'll see that the app bar stays and doesn't fade away. And then when we scroll down, it stays the same size, but once we reach the top, then it becomes larger. So for this project, instead of using pinned, we're going to be using floating. And just so you guys see it again, when we scroll, it fades away, and as soon as we scroll up, the app bar comes back. We're ready to create our bar chart now. In the UI, we see that we have a container with shadow on it, and we also have a column widget inside containing the bar chart. So let's start by creating this container. Let's scroll down to the child count, and for now we'll just change this to 1 and hit save. And in order to make the container with a shadow, we need to edit this container that we're returning. So underneath our color, let's add a decoration, box decoration. For the color, we'll set it to colors.white. And then the box shadow will be an array with box shadow. And then we set the color to colors.black 12. The offset, we'll set that to 0, 2. And then the blur radius, we'll set that to 6.0. Then we'll hit save. And we get this error because we have color outside of our box decoration, so we can delete the colors.red right here. Hit save. And now we see that we have a container with the shadow underneath it. We also have rounded corners, and we can easily add that by going back into our box decoration and adding another property called border radius. And this time we'll say border radius dot circular, and we can just set the radius to 10.0. Hit save, and now our borders are curved. Our container is going to have a child, and we'll call the child bar chart. And the bar chart is going to take in our list of weekly expenses. So we can just pass in weekly spending, which is imported from the data.dart file. Now inside our lib directory, we're going to make a new folder called widgets. And inside widgets, we'll make a new file called bar_chart.dart. And here we need to make a stateless widget. So we do that by typing stl and hitting enter. And then we'll call it bar chart. And remember to import material.dart. In order to import expenses, we need to pass in a list of doubles. So final list double, and we'll call it expenses. And then the constructor will be this.expenses. Go back to homescreen.dart and remember to import bar chart now. And hit save. And then we have an error when we pass in weekly spending, and that's because we need to pass in a named argument. So we'll just call it expenses and hit save, because the variable inside here is expenses. But we can also just remove the curly braces right here. And then the expenses here is not necessary. And then once we hit save, we see that the error disappears. Looking back at the UI, we see the first part of this bar chart is a column. So let's go to the bar chart, and we'll move this over a bit so we can see the UI when we code. We're going to build a column, and this column is going to have children. And the first widget inside our column is going to be a text widget that says weekly spending. And then we'll set the style, text style, font size 20.0, font weight.bold, and we'll set the letter spacing to 1.2. And just hit save. And now we see the text appears. Underneath the weekly spending, we see that we have a row widget that consists of an icon button, text, and then another icon button. So let's add a sized box first, and we'll set the height to 5.0. And then we'll create our row. So let's make our icon button. The icon will be icons.arrow back. The icon size will be 30.0. And then on pressed, we'll leave it empty for now. But if you were to implement functionality, the back arrow would most likely change some kind of date range, which would change the data loaded in here. Let's hit save. Now we have our first arrow. And then let's just add our second arrow now. So we'll copy our icon button and paste it again underneath. Instead of arrow underscore back, we'll do arrow underscore forward and hit save. And lastly, we need our text in between these two widgets. And we'll set it to November 10th, 2019, November 16th, 2019. Style, text style, font size 18.0, font weight. We'll make it font weight.w600, which is semi-bold. And then letter spacing will be 1.2. And hit save. Now if we compare what we have in our app right now to the desired UI, we can see that the weekly spending is centered, but the date range selector is not centered, and it looks like it's aligned to the left. So all we have to do is inside our row widget, we can add something called main axis alignment dot space around. And what this does is it creates an even amount of space between our widgets, and it puts half the space between the widgets in the leading and the trailing. So now our widgets are spaced out correctly. Our UI shows that we have a row widget here for our bar chart, and inside our row widget, these are columns. So we'll have a text, and then a bar, and then another text. And then we'll have 7 different bars. So underneath our row, let's create size box height 30.0. And then we'll make our row with children. And for now, we'll just create one child. And the first child will be a bar widget. And I'll take in a label. And we'll call this one SU, which is short for Sunday. It'll take in an amount spent, which is expenses sub-0. And then it needs to take in a most expensive value, so we know how to scale the bars proportionally. And for now, we'll just set that equal to 200. So let's write our bar right now. Underneath our bar chart class, we'll create a new stateless widget, and it'll be called bar. The 3 instance variables will be final string label, final double amount spent, final double most expensive. And then we need to create a constructor, this.label, this.amount spent, and this.most expensive. And make sure you include the curly braces before and after it. And once we save, we see that we're getting a pixel overflow error. And that's because inside our home screen, we set the height of our container to 100. So we can just remove this and hit save. Now for our bar class, we want to edit the build method here. So the first thing we need to know is what is the height of our bar. So we'll create a variable called final bar height and set it equal to the amount spent divided by the most expensive bar, so the bar that has the highest value, and then multiply this by the maximum height a bar can be. So we will multiply by a variable called max bar height. And this represents the max height we want our bar to be. Let's write final double max bar height, and we'll set it equal to 150.0. And hit save. Now for our bar, we know that each one of these is a column, and the column is going to have a text, a container, and then another text label. So let's first change the container to a column with children, and remember to put the semicolon at the end. The first child will be text, and this is going to be the amount spent. So we can do this by escaping the first $sign with a backslash, and then we use string interpolation to pass in the amount spent, dot toString as fixed, and then we want to only show 2 decimal places, so we'll put this as 2, and remember to put the closing curly brace. Next we have the container with a height of bar height, which is what we just calculated. The width we'll set it to 18.0. The decoration will be box decoration, color, and then we'll do theme.ofContext.primary color. And if you guys remember, we declared this inside our main.dart file, where we set the theme data primary color equal to colors.green. And by setting it to the context.primary color, instead of just doing colors.green, we're able to change the primary color here, and it'll change throughout the whole entire app. Now we can just add the border radius. We'll set the border radius .circular 6.0. And then lastly, we need another text box. And in this case, we want to say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we passed in the label here, so we can just call label. And then hit save. And now we see that our first bar appeared. Let's style the text and add some spacing. For our amount spent, we'll do style text style, font weight.w600. And then for our label, style text style, font size 16.0, font weight.w600, so also semi-bold. And then to add some spacing between these, all we have to do is add some size boxes between the text and container. The first one will be height of 6.0. And the second one will be height of 8.0. And now we have a good amount of spacing between the text and container. Now before we create the other bars, let's calculate the most expensive item. So we'll pass in most expensive here. And right before the return inside our build method, we'll create a variable called double most expensive and set it equal to 0. And then we're going to loop through our expenses. So expenses.forEach, we get a double price. And then we want to check if the price is greater than the current value of most expensive. If it is, then we want to set most expensive equal to price. Otherwise, we don't do anything. So this is going to loop through our 7 expenses that were randomly generated inside our weekly spending, and it'll grab the highest price. So let's hit save. And now we see that our bar became a lot longer because it's going to be proportional to the other values. Let's add the other bars now. We can copy this bar and then paste it 6 more times. For the second bar, we'll say the label is MO for Monday. We'll change expenses to 1. Next we have Tuesday. So TU. 2. Next is Wednesday. That's expenses 3. Thursday. Expenses 4. FR for Friday. 5. And then the last one is Saturday, so SA. And that's expenses index 6. Hit save. And all of our new bars appeared. In order to space them out evenly, like in the picture, and to have them start at the bottom of the row, all we have to do is go up to our row, which contains the bar widgets, and we're going to access main axis alignment. So this is the horizontal alignment, and do main axis alignment dot space evenly. So now the bars are spaced out evenly. And now to make the bars start at the bottom of the bar chart, we have to access cross-axis alignment dot end. Hit save, and now they're at the bottom. Lastly, let's add some padding around our column widget, because in the image we see that we have padding around our column here. So if we scroll back up to our column widget and then hit command period, add padding, and we'll change the edgeinsets.all to edgeinsets.all 15.0, and then we'll hit save. And now it's spaced out nicely. If we hot restart the app, we'll see that the values change because inside data.dart, this is being reloaded every time, so we can have a more dynamic feeling in our app. And then of course you guys always have the option to add real data to this app. Now let's hot restart the app one more time. And we see that the prices change accordingly. Back in homescreen.dart, let's fix our margin on our bar chart. And we'll change it to .from LTRB, which is left, top, right, and bottom. And we'll set it to 20.0, 20.0, 20.0, and the bottom will make 10.0. And we get a pixel overflow error here. So all we have to do is go back to our bar chart, and we can just change the padding from 15 to 12. And now the error disappeared. In order to create our categories, we need to go back to our homescreen.dart. And then for the child count, we're going to import categories and then add the length of the categories. So now we have 1 plus the category's length. So we have all 6 categories, which means right now we have 6 extra bar charts. And because we don't want 6 bar charts, we can check if the index is equal to 0, which means that it's the first value in this list. And if it is equal to 0, then we want to return the container. Otherwise, we want to return the categories. So we'll say final category, and make sure you import category, and set that equal to categories index minus 1, because at this point we would be at index 1, and we minus 1 because our list starts at index 0. Next, we need to calculate the total amount spent for our category, so we know how much of the bar to have left. So let's make a double called total amount spent, and we'll set it equal to 0. And then we're going to access our category dot expenses, which is our list of expenses, and then we'll do a for each loop over the expenses. And remember to import expense. And all we have to do is some simple addition. So total amount spent plus equals expense dot cost. So this loops through our category expenses and adds the cost of each item to our total amount spent. And then we want to return a function called build category, where we pass in the category and the total amount spent. Now let's go back to the top of our home screen state, and we'll write the function build category, and that takes in the category, and double total amount spent. And then for now, we will just return a container with margin edge insets dot symmetric, horizontal 20.0, vertical 10.0. And remember to add the semicolon after the container. Next, we'll give it a height of 100.0, and then we'll set the width to double dot infinity. And then in order to see the containers on our screen, we'll set a color to colors.red. And now we see all of our future category containers. Let's turn our category containers into more what the bar chart looks like, with the rounded corners and the shadow. So we'll add decoration, box decoration, border radius dot circular 10.0. And then the reason we get that error is because we have color outside of decoration. So if we hold down the Option key on Mac and hit down, we can move the color into the next line. And we can clearly see that we have rounded corners now. Let's add our box shadow, and this will be in an array, box shadow, color, colors.black12, offset 0 in the X and 2 in the Y. And then lastly, we need blur radius to be 6.0. And we'll change the color from colors.red to colors.white. Now if we look at our UI, we can see that this is a column widget here. And the first item in our column widget will be a row with 2 text widgets. So let's add a child to our container. And then we'll say column, children, row, children, and then we'll create text. And then this one will be category.name. And then our second text widget will be the remaining amount of money we have. So our category.maxAmount minus the total amount spent out of the category.maxAmount. So the money we allocated for our budget. So single quote, and then escape the first $sign so it shows up. And then string interpolation, category.maxAmount minus the total amount spent. And then to convert this to a string, we'll put parentheses around it. Dot to string as fixed 2. And if we hit save now, we'll see that this is the remaining amount of money we have left. And then after that, we want to add a /, and then / to escape the $, string interpolation category dot max amount. And now if we hit save, we see that we get the values of our remaining money out of the max amount of money we designated. And for a reminder, the max amount comes from our data.dart, where we assigned it right here. And these are all arbitrary values. And taking another look at our UI, we can see that this text is centered here inside our column widget. And we also have a space between in the main axis alignment of the row. So each of the text widgets are pushed to the outer edges. So let's first add main axis alignment to our row widget. Main axis alignment dot space between. And now they're at the opposite ends of each other. And then to center it, we will just add main axis alignment dot center. And hit save. And that vertically centered our row. Let's quickly add some styling to our text widgets. Style, text style, font size 20.0, font weight, we'll make it semi-bold, which is W600. And hit save. Now for our text here, style, text style, font size, we'll make this one 18.0. And the font weight will be font weight.w600 too. And in order to fix the amount of decimals that show after the max amount, we can just copy the toString as fixed here and add it right there. And now we see 450.00, 500.00, and so on. Let's add some padding around our text elements. Let's go back to the container up here. And right underneath margin, we'll add padding, edge insets, .all 20.0. Now we're ready to create the bars down here. So the way we're going to create these bars is by using a stack. And that stack is going to consist of 2 containers. One container will have a color that is green, orange, or red, depending on how much money we have left. And then the other container will be a light gray color. So let's go underneath our row widget here. And make sure you're still inside the column widget. We're going to add a size box of height 10.0. And then we want to create a stack. So our stack will have children. And just like we talked about, we will have a container. And we'll set the height to 20.0. And then add a box decoration. So decoration, box decoration, color, colors.gray 200, comma, border radius dot circular 15.0. And hit save. And now we have our first container. In order to show another container on top of the light container, we need to put our new container after the container we just created. So now we'll make container, height 20.0, decoration, and let's just copy this and paste it in here. And then we'll change the color to colors.red for now. And hit save. And now we see that all of our bars are filled with the color red. However, if we were to edit the width of our second bar, so the bar that's on top of our gray bar, and make it 50.0, then we see that the width of the red bar reduces to reveal the gray bar underneath it. Now the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we make this bar the correct length, depending on how big the container is? Because our container may be different sizes based on how big the screen is. So we have to figure out how to get the width of this first bar. And the way we can do that is by using a widget called a layout builder. And that's what we're going to wrap our stack in. So let's hit command period. wrap our stack in a new widget, layout builder. And this layout builder has a builder with build context. Box constraints. And then we need to put a curly brace here. So we're going to remove the child here, change that to return, and then I'm going to highlight the whole entire stack, and then hold down Option and click up. And then change the last comma here to a semicolon, and reformat. And now that we have our constraints, we can see what does constraints print out. So do print constraints dot max height and print constraints dot max width. And hit save. And now we see that our height is infinity because we never specified a height. And then the max width, however, is 334 because that's the max width our container can be inside of our category container. So using these values, let's calculate our bar width. First, let's make a variable called final double max bar width. And as we saw before, that'll just equal constraints dot max width. And then we need to calculate the percent of our remaining money. So final double percent. And we'll calculate this by doing category dot max amount minus the total amount of money we've already spent divided by the category dot max amount. So it's the same exact thing we did here to get the remaining amount of money and the max amount, but we're just dividing it to get the percentage now. And then we calculate our bar width by doing double bar width equals the percent times the max bar width. So our bar width will never be greater than our max bar width because our percent is between 0 and 1, and then we're multiplying it by max bar width. And then the last check we have to do is if bar width is less than 0, then we just set our bar width to 0. And we have to check for this because there's a chance that our category.max amount minus total amount spent is negative, which in that case would make our bar width negative. If we used absolute value around category.max amount minus total amount spent, that wouldn't work because let's say that this became a negative value, and then we did the absolute value. There's a chance that it could be even greater than our category.max amount, which would mean that this percentage would be greater than 1. And if the percentage is greater than 1, then our max bar width would be filled all the way instead of being empty, which is how it should be. So that's why we have to do this check to see if the bar width is less than 0, and then manually set it to 0 if it is. Now that we have the bar width, we can change the width right here of our red container to bar width. And when we hit save, we see that all of our bars represent the correct proportion, and the data is displayed accordingly. All that's left to finish off the remaining money bars is to change the color based on how much money is left. So we're going to write a function called getColor, and that's going to take in a build context, so pass in context, and a percent. And the percent is the percent we just calculated up here. The reason we need to pass in context is so that we can access our primary color. To organize our code, we're going to create a new folder under our lib directory called helpers. The file we're going to make will be called color_helper.dart. And then we need to write the function that's going to return a color. So color, and make sure to import material.dart, getColor, build context, double percent. And then we need to check the percentage to assign the correct color. So if the percent is greater than or equal to 0.50, then we want to return theme.ofContext.primaryColor, which in this case is green. Else if the percent is greater than or equal to 0.25, then we want to return colors.orange. Otherwise, if the percentage is less than 0.25, then we just want to return colors.red. And now if we save this, you can go back to home screen, save this screen, and remember to import getColor by importing the color helper.dart. Hit save, and now we see that our remaining money bars all changed to the correct colors. Hot restart the app, and we see that the bars changed again. Next, we can start working on our category screen, which is the screen we're going to go to when we click on one of these categories. So let's go to the top of our home screen.dart. And for the build category method, we want to wrap our container inside a new widget called gesture detector. And then for the onTap function, we're going to call navigator.push context route material page route builder category screen, and we'll pass in the category. And remember to put your commas. Let's hit save, and then we'll create the category screen right now. So inside our screens directory, we will create a new file, category screen.dart, and then this will be a stateful widget, so stf category screen. Remember to always import material.dart, and then we'll make a variable called final category, where we need to import category model called category, and then we need the constructor category screen this.category, and then hit save, and then we will return a scaffold down here. Back in home screen, remember to import the category screen. And now if we click on any of these categories, we should segue to the new screen. And we see it's working. And then to go back on an iOS device, all you need to do is slide backwards. On Android, you can just hit the back button down here. Let's set up our app bar. So let's click into one of the categories. And then for our scaffold, we're going to have an app bar, title, text, and then it's going to be the name of the category. So we get that by doing widget.category, and that lets us access the category up here, .name. And now we also have a back button too, that we can click to go back. Now we need to add an add button up here, and we can easily do that by just adding actions, icon button, icons.add, size 30.0, and then don't forget to add on pressed, because if you forget it, the button's not going to show up. Hit save, and now we have our add button here. We're going to create the contents of our category screen using a column, and I'll show you guys how to make that scrollable by adding a single child scroll view. So after the app bar, we'll create a single child scroll view, and the child will be a column widget with children. The first child is going to be a container, because we see that this is the radial progress bar that we're going to be creating. And similar to the bar chart, the radial progress bar is going to sit inside a container. So let's make that container now. Container margin edge insets.all 20.0. We'll add padding edge insets.all 20.0. And then the height will be 250.0. The width will be double.infinity. And then decoration, just like we always do, box decoration. Color, colors.white. Border radius dot circular 10.0. And then box shadow color, colors dot black 12. Offset 0, 2. And blur radius 6.0. And now we have our container, which is going to contain our radial progress bar. We're ready to create our radial progress bar. So let's go up to the top of the category screen state. And inside our build method, we want to define the variables we're going to need for our radial progress bar. So we need to have the total amount spent, so we know how much of the bar is missing. We need the amount left, so we know how much of the bar is left over. And then we need the percentage, so we know how much of the bar to fill. So first, let's make double total amount spent, and we'll set that equal to 0. Then we'll do widget.category, and we'll access the expenses. And then for each expense, and remember to import expense. And then all we have to do, like we did before, is total amount spent plus equals expense dot cost. The next variable we need to create is the amount left. So final double amount left equals widget dot category dot max amount minus the total amount spent, which is what we just defined. And then the last variable is final double percent. And then we get the percent by doing amount left divided by widget.category.maxAmount. And that's how we're going to know how much of the bar to fill. Now let's scroll back down to our container. And we're going to make a child. First, let's display the center text. So we're going to say center child text. And then for the text here, we're going to escape the $sign. And then string interpolation. Amount left dot to string as fixed 2. And then we'll put a /, escape another $sign, and then $sign widget dot category dot max amount. Hit save, and now we have the money appearing here. And we can style this by doing text style, font size 20.0. And then for the font weight, we're going to set that to semi-bold, so W600. Now, in order to create this radial progress bar, we need to create a custom painter widget. And that custom painter widget, which we'll call radial painter, is going to draw 2 lines. The line underneath is going to be gray, and then the line on top of it is going to be whatever color that's returned by the percent from our getColor function. So inside our widgets, let's make a new file called radial_painter.dart, and we'll make class radial painter extends custom painter, and make sure you import material. And if we hover over radial painter and then click quick fix, we see that we're missing 2 override methods, so we can just click create 2 missing overrides. And then we get the method paint, and the method should repaint. We're going to have should repaint equal to true, because we want the radial painter to always update itself and to change values accordingly based on the expenses here. So if the user adds a new expense, then we want the radial painter to redraw itself. Let's remove the to do here. And before we implement the paint method, we need to create some instance variables. The first one is going to be final color background color, and that's going to be equal to the color here. So that's going to be the light gray color. Next we have color line color, and that's going to be the color of our filled portion. Double percent, and final double width. And make sure to add final before the double for percent here. After this, we need to create the constructor. So radial painter, this dot bg color, this dot line color, this dot percent, and this dot width. And now we're ready to start implementing the painter. So let's remove that. And the first thing we need to create is the background line. So that's going to be paint bg line equals paint. And then instead of doing this and saying bg line.color and then setting this individually, we can do paint instance dot dot color equals bg color, and then another dot dot stroke cap equals stroke cap dot round. And we can just keep chaining dot dots. So another dot dot style equals painting style dot stroke. And then lastly, we need stroke width equal to the width. And the width and background color are the values we passed in here. If we hover over the round in stroke cap dot round, we can see that dot round makes the beginning and the ending of the line a semicircle. Now we also need to create a line for the complete line. So we'll call it complete line. And then instead of background color, this is going to be line color. And then we'll keep these the same. After instantiating our lines, we need to find the center of our painter. So we can do offset center equals offset size.width divided by 2, comma size.height divided by 2. And we get the size value from passing in size to the paint. And size is just equal to the size of our given area to draw out our radial progress bar. Next, we need to calculate a radius. So double radius equals min size.width divided by 2, size.height divided by 2. And this is getting the smaller of the size.width divided by 2 and size.height divided by 2 in the event that our width and height are different sizes. And in order to get rid of the error, we need to hover over min and import Dart Math and hit save. We have Dart Math up here now. Next, we need to actually draw our background line in a circle. And that's really simple to do. We have access to the canvas. So we can say canvas, draw circle. And then we pass in the center, which is the center of our painter. The radius will be the radius we just found. And then the paint will be background line. And we can actually save this right now and go back to our category screen. And in order to make our background line show up on our simulator, we need to wrap our center widget inside a new widget. And we're going to call it custom paint. Custom paint will take in a foreground painter, which is of type custom painter. And we'll just pass in the radial painter that we just created, so make sure to import it. And then we need to pass in the values. So background color, that's colors gray 200. Next we have line color, and we'll call get color. Pass in context, and pass in the percent that we calculated above. Percent will just be percent. And then the width, we'll set that to 15.0. And make sure to import get color from color helper. Now if we hit save, we see that the outer ring appears, just like in the original UI. Let's go back to our radial painter, and we'll draw out the arc here. And that's also pretty simple to do. All we have to do is call canvas.drawArc. And then we need to specify a rect. The rect is the size of the container that we're drawing the arc in. And in this case, we want to draw it inside the bounds of our circle. So we can do that by doing rect.FromCircle. And then we pass in the center, which is what we just defined above, and the radius. Now the start angle represents the angle where we want to start drawing our line at. And in this case, we'll make it negative pi divided by 2, because we want to start at the very top, right here. Our sweep angle is the value in radians of how far we're going to draw the curve. So let's actually calculate this right above here. And we'll say double sweep angle equals 2 times pi times the percent. And then use center, we'll set that equal to false. And then paint, we'll make that complete line. Now if we hit save, we see that we have $173.45 out of 500, and the radial progress bar accurately indicates that. If we wanted the bar to start down here, then we can just remove the negative here, and now it's going this way in the clockwise direction. If we wanted the bar to start from the right side, then we can set this to 0, And then if we want the bar to be on the left-hand side, in the middle, then we can just put pi. But in our case, we want the bar to start at the very top, so we'll do negative pi divided by 2. I hot restarted the app so we can look at different values. And we can click into food. We see that the bar accurately depicts how much money we have left. Same with entertainment. And one more thing I can show you guys is if this is set equal to true, and we save that, and go into any of these, what happens is that the ends of the bar connect up to the center. So that's why we set it equal to false. So that doesn't happen. Let's finish up our category screen by adding in our list of expenses down here. We're going to write a function called buildExpenses, and we want to put that right under our container, but inside the column widget. And now at the very top of our category screen state, we're writing the function buildExpenses, and we're going to have a list of widgets called expense list. The idea is that we're going to loop through our categories expenses, and then we're going to append a container widget to our expense list. And we do this by doing widget.category.expenses.forEach expense, and then expense list.add. And now inside here, we want to return a container. We see that this container is going to have centered alignment. It also has the same box shadow we always use with rounded corners. And then the child of the container will be a row with 2 text widgets with space between. So let's align the alignment to center. We'll set the margin edge insets dot symmetric, horizontal 20.0, vertical 10.0. We'll set the height of the container to 80.0, and then the width will be double dot infinity. For the decoration, we'll do box decoration, colors.white as always, border radius dot circular 10.0, and then as usual, box shadow colors.black 12, offset 0.2, and then blur radius will be 6.0. And now we get an error here because we didn't return anything in buildExpenses. So right after our for each loop, we want to return a column widget. And that column widget will have the children expense list because that's a list of widgets. Now if we hit save, we see that we have our containers appearing. Now we can add our row widget in. So the child of our container will be a row children. And then just like in the image, we'll have 2 text items. Text expense.name, style text style, font size 20.0, font weight, and we'll make this one bold. Next we have another text widget. This time we need to use some string interpolation. So we'll say negative, and then escape the $, expense.cost.toString as fixed 2. And remember to close off the curly brace. And after that, we'll style text style, font size 20.0, font weight .w600. Now if we hit save, we see that our 2 text widgets appear here. And let's change the color of our expense cost to colors.red. And then to get the spacing between our item number and the expense, we can just add it into row right here and say main axis alignment dot space between. and that's going to push them to opposite ends. And then the last thing we have to do is add some padding around our widgets. So if we hover over the row, command period, add padding, we can do edge insets.all 20.0. And instead of 20.0, let's actually use 30.0, so we have even more padding on the sides. And now that's looking pretty good. Now we're all done with our simple budget app. If we hot restart the app, we get new values in the weekly spending and all of our categories. We have a bar chart that shows us how much we spend on a weekly basis, and then 6 different categories where we can see the remaining amount of money we have for each category and how much we started with. And then based on how much money is left, we show a different color. And if we click on any of these, we see that the bar accurately represents how much money we have left, and we have a list of expenses down here that we can scroll through. In the event we actually spend too much money, we can simulate that by changing the max amount of food to 150 and hitting save and hot restarting the app. Then we see that for food we spent negative 170.55 cents out of $150. And if we click on this, then we see that the bar turned all red to show us that we overspent. And then in the event that we only spend a little less money, in this case we overspent $11.10, then the bar only goes over its original starting point by a little bit. So we can hot restart the app again. And we'll see that this time we overspent $65. And when we go into it, we see that the bar goes about a quarter of the way backwards, and it's still red to show us that we overspent.